Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Day 2 of our Energy Summit. I'm Brady Deaton, Chancellor here at the University of Missouri in Columbia, and it's my pleasure to welcome you as host of this conference to this venue, and we're particularly pleased that you've had the opportunity to visit the campus here at a time when the weather's cooperated so far and has enabled you to get a chance to enjoy the beauty of what truly is a very, very fabulous campus that is designated as a botanic garden. So the few things you must see while you're here. Take the opportunity to stroll around and enjoy the 5,400 trees on our campus and the 650 varieties of plants that make this a very, very beautiful place to do business and to have conferences such as this. I would point out, if you have a moment, to note that the campus features 18 buildings that are on the historic places, the National Register of Historic Places. We have 600-year-old Chinese lions on the north end of the journalism complex. We have Thomas Jefferson's original tombstone, much to the surprise of some of our visitors from Virginia from time to time. And if you've not walked over to the Christopher Bond Life Science Center, you should treat yourself and see the sculpture, Joy of Discovery, which is a 4-story tall suspended sculpture that adorns and points to the knowledge vision that we have not only for life sciences, but certainly for energy and so many other aspects of our campus. We use renewable fuels here in the theme of this event to power this campus in major ways. We use corn cobs, tires, waste wood chips, and switchgrass to provide cleaner sources of energy production. And we, for example, have cut our use of coal supplies by about 5% over the last year, and save more than 7,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions in a single year. It's truly a remarkable achievement. Led by our students and their sustained Missouri efforts to clean up the campus, to clean up after football and sporting events, they've helped recycle 24 tons of aluminum, plastic, and glass containers at home football games alone. I point to these areas of emphasis because they reflect a spirit of conservation, of looking at alternatives, of greening, and of sustaining the environment that we are blessed to have here on this campus and throughout this state and nation. So this is a campus from students to faculty to staff that welcomes this Energy Summit, that will learn, will educate, and discover alternatives that will serve the future interests of our state, our nation, and indeed our global society. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to the campus, and at this time I will turn the program back over to Jack Carney, with great thanks also for his tremendous leadership in pulling this summit together. Jack?
Thank you, Brady. It certainly is a pleasure to be in this facility. What a wonderful auditorium. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us at 7:30. You all get a gold star for getting up early. Could you please turn off your cell phones? We have more outstanding speakers ready for Day 2 of the summit. First up is yet another Missouri graduate who has achieved a high profile on the global stage for his expertise in energy, science, and policy. Dr. Robert K. Dixon holds bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees from the University of Missouri here in Columbia. Today, Robert leads the Climate Change and Chemicals team at the Global Environment Facility in Washington, D.C. He has conducted energy and environmental projects in more than 80 countries and has a wealth of experience with the White House, including his role on a task force on energy security and climate change for the National Security Council. Robert was also head of the Energy Technology Policy Division of the International Energy Agency in Paris, and along with other members of the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Robert is going to give us a world view on energy technology, a perfect backdrop for today's research and commercialization opportunities. He will then leave us to join in a journalism school discussion about energy reporting with CNBC's energy reporter Sharon Epperson, the publisher of the St. Louis Business Journal, some J School faculty and students, and others. This journalism session, by the way, is a discussion that Mr. Pickens actually spearheaded yesterday before delivering the keynote address for our Energy Summit. Please join me in welcoming Robert K. Dixon.
Good morning, everybody. It's early, isn't it? The people that are serious about energy here in Missouri are in the room this morning, and it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm especially honored, a native son here in Missouri, to be with you this morning. And it's a special honor to represent the World Bank Group here at the meeting. World Bank located in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to speak to you about some of our work at the World Bank, as well as some of our activities at the International Energy Agency. I worked at the IEA in Paris, France a few years ago, and they are, of course, the folks that are charged with the repository of the global data on energy issues, and you've heard many speakers refer to the IEA data and the analysis. Mr. Pickens quoted it a number of times yesterday. Well, this is the source data, so I'm going to share with you a story from our perspective at the World Bank and the IEA, and I hope you find it enjoyable and entertaining. First and foremost, I want to remind all of you that indeed we live in a very complicated world, and much of the world needs energy services, energy products. And although we're blessed with abundant energy here in the U.S., and we're very concerned about our energy security, our economic prosperity, and protecting our environment, I want to remind you that in a global context, a large part of the world suffers from extreme energy poverty. Almost 2 billion people seek energy services, basic energy services, heat or cooling services or light, or just the very minimum services needed for a very meager quality of life. So to put it in a global context, indeed, if we don't change the way we're doing business here in the U.S. and around the world, by 2030, we'll still have well over 1 billion people around the planet that do not have adequate energy services. Now, why do I bring this to your attention in Missouri? Because I believe that the United States has great energy technology, we have great thinkers, we have great doers. And in fact, I hope that as one part of the dialogue which follows the Missouri Energy Summit, that you'll think about Missouri's place in the world and the opportunities for developing new markets and exporting your expertise and your technology to those far corners of the world which could benefit from the knowledge that's here. I also want to speak to environmental issues. I believe almost every speaker has mentioned the topic of climate change or protecting our environment, and indeed it is a very serious problem. I left this university in 1982, and 7 years later I found myself representing the United States in 1989 in the climate change negotiations. And I thought, well, this would be an interesting assignment, something we can sink our teeth into. There's nothing more important than saving the planet, and we'll get this treaty done and we'll solve this problem. Well, of course, 20 years later, we're still negotiating. We're not very close to a global agreement at all. I can assure you of that. I just came from the negotiations in Bonn, Germany, and I'm going back to Bonn in a few weeks to continue the work. But in fact, the story is not a very promising one. As you look at this graphic, greenhouse gas emissions continue to grow rapidly around the world. In spite of all the commitments by our president and leaders around the world, we have not yet come to grips with the challenges of growing greenhouse gas emissions or the other pollutants that are associated with the energy industry. And we're looking, of course, for alternatives, a different pathway forward that we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Now, Americans, of course, were pretty worried that over the years we've been the #1 greenhouse gas producer. Of course, that changed a couple of years ago. China now surpasses the United States as the largest greenhouse gas producer in the world. Soon the U.S. will move down the list. We'll be in our 2nd, 3rd, 4th position. Indonesia will soon surpass the U.S., and India and a few other countries are not far behind. The reason I bring this to your attention, of course, is that America has an obligation, stewards of the environment, to come to the table and, of course, negotiate an agreement and identify the technologies, the alternative energy pathways to address greenhouse gas emissions. But again, an opportunity for Missourians to think about what are the export opportunities, what are the opportunities to work with those in other lands to address the greenhouse gas emissions. Many of the same problems challenges, opportunities you have here in Missouri with a coal-based electricity industry and such, same challenges in China, in India, South Africa, and other parts of the world. So I just want to bring that to your attention because, indeed, we live in a global community and we're all stewards of our economies, our environments, and our energy security. Finally, I'd like to speak to the issue in some detail of energy security. Yesterday, virtually every speaker spoke of the very difficult circumstances the U.S. finds itself in. We live in a world of haves and have-nots, and indeed those who have oil reserves, there's a great imbalance between those who have it and those who don't. This is pointed out. Saudi Arabia and other countries, of course, have vast reserves of petroleum, oil. There are vast reserves of other sources of fossil energy, coal, in all parts of the world. The U.S. has abundant coal, but we have used a lot of our petroleum, and we have abundant natural gas, but we're looking, of course, to find more domestic sources. But we live in a world of haves and have-nots, and if you look at the demand at the bottom of the slide, of course, the United States uses a very large proportion of the world's petroleum. This is not sustainable, as Mr. Pickens said yesterday. It's just not practical to borrow money from others and wash it through our economy and then send it to the Middle East or other places to buy petroleum. It's not sustainable, and of course there is a linkage between the global economic problems that we've encountered, the severe economic downturn we've seen in the U.S. and our energy security. So just to put a fine point on it, this is the data, and it's looking like we need to make some big changes in the way we think about our energy security, and there are opportunities to diversify our supply, to look at alternative technologies and new policies to address this very serious challenge. Now, about 3 years ago, President Bush and Prime Minister Blair, Prime Minister Koizumi of Japan, and others asked us at the IEA to take a look at the question, what would it take to address these very serious energy security issues, the issues of economic prosperity and protecting our environment? They're bombarded with brilliant briefings and good data and such, but weaving the story together in such a way that they could pull the levers of policy, that they could make their governments responsive to the data, to the new technologies, to the opportunities of the new policies. They were scratching their heads because indeed there's a lot of contradictory advice. There's very different advice depending on your natural resource base, the natural resource base in Japan being very different than it is here in the U.S. or in Europe, and of course the developing world has its own set of special challenges and opportunities. So we were asked at the IEA to in fact pull together a picture of what the future might look like, a different picture, if you will, using alternative technologies, alternatives to our traditional energy systems. Somebody said I was the one of the warm-up acts for Governor Dixon this morning, and I can't help but comment on that. Some of you don't know me very well. Some of you know me and were part of my family here when I went to school at Columbia, but Governor Nixon and I were roommates years ago at Hudson Hall. And I was the warm-up act then, and I guess I'm the warm-up act this morning. So some things never change, do they? So yeah. So Anyway, I'll tell you what. I won't back up, and I apologize for the slides. I cannot see the screen from where I'm standing, so I apologize to you. But well, maybe I will back up. I won't. Anyway, so we were asked by the world leaders to address the issues of energy security, environmental protection, and economic prosperity. And indeed, a very big challenge, looking out to the middle of the century, 2050. All of us in this room hope to live out to the middle of the century, perhaps beyond that. But indeed, it's a very daunting task to help world leaders think about the next 4 decades and help them think about investment decisions. But indeed, we took on this task. We looked at short and medium-term technology investment opportunities, and particularly the whole slew of new energy technologies which are coming onto the scene. We looked at scenarios where, in fact, we could help reduce CO2 emissions by the middle of the century, and in fact, this implies a very different energy future, a dramatically different energy future, and I'll speak to the topic of energy revolution in a few seconds. We also looked at some very, frankly, wild scenarios, if you will, wild in the sense that it's a world that few people can imagine today, where in fact we live in highly energy efficient economies, where in fact most of our energy sources are not derived from fossil fuels but from renewable energy sources. and it implies a completely different energy system. The building envelopes that we live in, our homes, our offices, our schools, are all dramatically transformed and use energy much more efficient than we do today. So when we took a look at all this data and rolled it up, and again, you know, when you're speaking to a world leader, you've got 5 or 10 minutes of time. So we tried to condense our story and make it very compelling to get their attention. And these are the graphics that we shared with the world leaders at the G8 summit a few months ago. And in fact, our advice to them was that a new energy revolution is needed, that we can actually address CO2 emissions, we continue to grow our economies, develop new technologies, and move these technologies out of the laboratories into the workplace and into our lives. And I'm going to share the story this morning with you through the prism of what it would take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but in fact you could look at this from the perspective of energy security or other perspectives. But in fact there are a whole host of technologies that we can use that are coming out of our laboratories. Most of our laboratories here in the U.S. are, of course, cutting-edge laboratories. 80% of the world's energy research and development occurs in 2 countries, the United States and Japan. And in fact, most of these technologies, carbon capture and storage, a new generation of nuclear energy technologies, nuclear fission, the opportunities for new renewable technologies. You know, most of the renewable energy technologies, many of them were developed in and around the United States space program in the 1950s and 60s. Many people say, well, gosh, where did all that money go? That $24 billion we spent to go to the moon. But in fact, you look at our investments in solar energy technologies and fuel cells and other technologies, in fact, they have their roots in the U.S. space program. And Americans ought to be developing and selling these technologies around the world. Unfortunately, we've dropped down the list. We're not exporting and selling as much as we should be, but there are great opportunities to, in fact, reduce greenhouse gas emissions and both on the supply side as well as the energy efficiency side. I like to think of energy efficiency as the gift that keeps on giving. In fact, if we retrofit light bulbs in this room, or we change the heating and cooling systems, or the computers that I'm using this morning, in fact, if all these appliances become much more energy efficient, then of course we reduce our emissions, we save money, and of course we help with the energy security issue. So energy efficiency is perhaps one of the greatest opportunities, one of the greatest gifts here in Missouri and in states across the United States and nations around the world. Now, what will this energy revolution take? And of course, this is what when that world leader looks you in the eye and says, well, you know, how can I get this done? I've got so many levers I can pull. I've got a Congress that's hard to work with, and I don't have very much money, and I'm not sure if the American people are going to follow me. You know, what can I do, and how can I get this done? Very real questions that are asked of us. And this graphic, I think, hopefully captures what it's going to take in the future to get it done. If, in fact, if we want a different future, an energy security future, one where we protect our environment. This is the average annual power generation capacity additions between next year and 2050, over the next 40 years. Many in your room this will be a big part of your life. But in fact, we are talking about an energy revolution. The pink data, the orange-pink data, of course, is what we're doing today. The blue lines indicate what we need to do to, in fact, to stabilize our emissions, our greenhouse gas emissions, and enhance our energy security. In fact, if we want to go all the way, then in fact the light blue lines are what it's going to take. And the message I want to leave with you is that in fact we are not today on a pathway for a sustainable energy future. We need to dramatically change our investment portfolio, not just a little bit, not 5%, not 10%, but in fact we need to double or triple or quadruple our efforts in many areas. Just to give you some examples, we often aspire to a nuclear energy future. I do, indeed. I think nuclear energy is a very important technology, and in parts of the world we're seeing a nuclear energy renaissance. But in fact, if you look at what it's going to take on a global scale to in fact reach this nuclear energy renaissance, we're going to need to be constructing somewhere between 24 and 32 new nuclear power plants a year on a global scale. Well, what are we doing today? Does anybody know? We're doing 1 or 2 a year. Frankly, a little bit less than that, so on average. So we're talking about a dramatic change in the way we think about our energy future and the way we invest, dramatic changes in investments. If you look at renewable energy, a lot of interest in renewable energy. Missouri has great renewable energy resources in wind and solar, geothermal, biomass, but indeed the investment portfolio is going to have to change dramatically. The number of investments, the size of the investments, the scale of the investments will be much, much bigger than they are today. So, and the same, of course, goes with solar. Today, solar, wind, geothermal, other renewable energy sources are about 4% of what we use in America, so we need to dramatically improve that in the future if we're going to be on a pathway for a sustainable energy future. What will it cost to do this? Well, some of it pays for itself. Others, investments are going to require new capital and a new way of thinking, a new way of financing our energy future. If we're going to reduce emissions in the United States, and this is, of course, on our minds in Washington, D.C. and the capitals of other nations around the world, some of you know that Chairman Waxman in the House introduced a new cap-and-trade bill. We're going to cap greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to trade emissions in the energy sector and other parts of our economy to, of course, reduce our emissions and stay under that cap. But there are great opportunities, but as well with new technologies, but also challenges in finding the finance to make it work. Of course, the most efficient opportunities are in the end-use sector. That is, improving the efficiency of our economy. We think about our economy as being very efficient, and certainly it is. We have a great energy sector built in and around the Second World War. It served us well. But in fact, in the future, we're going to have to aspire to the energy efficiency that they currently have in Europe and Japan and other places, because we're not there today. There are other investments that will be required that will be more expensive. The transportation sector, we heard about the transportation sector yesterday, but the challenges there are big, very big, as some of the speakers have said. But the costs of these investments are going to be enormous to transform our fleets from the current fossil energy-based fleets to those with electric vehicles or other sources. But we have the know-how, we have the ability, we have the capital to do it. But we need to be thinking about these strategies now and planning for the future. I've often asked, well, of all these technologies, who are going to be the winners and losers? And a message I'd like to leave with you today, if you remember nothing else that I say this morning or my first 5 blank slides, indeed, I want you to remember that we're going to need all the energy sources. Every energy supplier, every energy worker in this room is so precious. We're going to need all of these technologies, and there will be some that do better than others. But in fact, given the vast size of the U.S., the scope of the challenges and at the global scale, the opportunities to use all these technologies and find a niche is a very important one. I won't list all those technologies with you, but I don't think there's going to be winners and losers. I think they're all going to be winners because they contribute to a sustainable energy future. Now, I know this is not an eye test at 7:45 in the morning, but I know there are many people in the room thinking about research and development plans. I know there's a lot of interest in I was talking to the university leadership last night about retooling and looking at opportunities for investments in research and development. I just want to share with you that, in fact, there's a lot of folks, a lot of universities, a lot of countries, a lot of institutions thinking about research and development opportunities. And I share this eye test with you because I just want to remind you that, in fact, there's a lot of planning and preparation thinking about these alternative technologies, alternative scenarios, alternative policies. And I hope that you'll network with these communities and work with them very closely. Being at the IEA, my desk was flooded each and every day with email and planning documents from countries around the world. A lot of clever people working on the challenges and opportunities. And I hope that the University of Missouri and the people of Missouri will join arms with others around the world that are working on these issues. And you're not starting at the beginning of this equation, and in fact there's a lot of folks that want to help you and reach out to you and cooperate with you, trade with you, and help you grow your economy, and they're looking for your expertise and opportunities to work with you. Now, just to wrap up here a little bit, I know there's a lot of renewable energy folks in the audience this morning, and I just want to remind you that in fact at the IEA, at the World Bank, other places, we're very high on renewable energy. Even though we live in a world that's awash in fossil energy, we think that renewables will grow very dramatically in the future. This is just one of the scenarios out to the middle of the century, but we see a dramatic growth in renewable energy opportunities. And again, Missouri blessed with great renewable energy resources. We hope that you're able to capitalize on these opportunities. and grow your renewable portfolio with the rest of the world. We're looking forward to, of course, the decision making in Congress and at the White House, whether we're going to see renewable portfolio standards for all of America that will set goals, 10, 15, 20% of the portfolio of the generation mix associated with renewable energy sources. It's a goal, it's an opportunity. I understand there are many barriers, but we hope that we can get there someday. There are opportunities, of course, with carbon capture and storage, and I want to point this out because, in fact, much of Missouri's generation is associated with coal. I know there's a debate here in Missouri about the use of coal, how to dispose of the CO2 and other pollutants, but there are opportunities with carbon capture and storage, and looking at it at a global scale. In fact, we see great opportunities to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions through investments in the electricity sector and the industrial sector and switching fuels, as Mr. Pickens talked about yesterday, opportunities to use alternative technologies, inject the CO2 into deep deposits, or to grow algae or other opportunities to dispose of this gas. There are also some supply side benefits, supply security benefits associated with these investments. And again, I just want, looking out to the future, opportunities for alternative investments, moving away from fossil energy. Not that fossil energy has not served us well, it has. But as we run out of fossil energy or it becomes more expensive, opportunities for investments in nuclear energy and other renewables. And just a graphic to kind of drive that story home, that as we look out to the middle of the century, again, energy revolution is needed, investments are needed to ensure that 30, 40, 50 years from now, that in fact we have a different energy future. I was talking to somebody yesterday about the power sector in America, and I'm reminded of the statistic that about 94% of all power plants ever built in America are still standing today. You think, well, gosh, that's rather startling, isn't it? You think that they would turn over, they would change. We change cars every 13 years in America. We change houses. We renovate our buildings at universities and such. But in fact, the power sector, these investments are so large to get the facilities sited and such that we're not able to move as quickly or to renovate or to in fact change as much as we want to. So we need to think ahead. If we're going to have a different energy future by the middle of the century, we need to do things differently today. And then finally, I'll end with some comments on the transport sector. I'm just about out of time, but in fact, there are opportunities in the transport sector for a different future. You've heard about some of that yesterday, opportunities with fuel cell cars, electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, alternative diesels, biodiesels, and of course, traditional gasoline. As we look out to the middle of the century, if we're going to achieve the energy security that we all aspire to, it's going to require a different fleet of vehicles than we drive today. And I know, looking very proudly in the parking lot this morning, I saw a lot of hybrid vehicles, a few Priuses out there, and Ford Escorts and others where, in fact, hybrid technology is taking root. But in fact, we're talking about, if we're going to achieve a sustainable energy future, the changes in our fleets will have to be very dramatic, and of course the big three automakers in America are stepping up to that challenge. But if you think about the United States in the global context, of course next year the United States will become the second largest automobile market in the world. China will surpass us. So we need to think about our place in the future, the way we build and sell automobiles, and the way we market them, and the way we service our own economy, and think about the transport sector. The transport questions are perhaps the most difficult ones because it involves personal choices by individuals and such. Reshaping a power plant, a little bit easier in some ways. We've only got a few hundred of those around the United States, a little over 1,000, I guess. But indeed, the choices we make about personal transportation systems are a big challenge. Of course, these costs, I'm out of time this morning, but the costs are going to be something that we'll have to think about. Again, personal choices, finding ways to buy transportation systems that meet our needs, but at the same time that are affordable. And of course, the transport sector and the emissions, you know that those fumes coming out of your tailpipe, although they're a lot cleaner than they were 40 years ago, still highly loaded with greenhouse gases. And again, as we think about our place in the world, our stewardship of the economy, the opportunities to look for alternatives to the way we do business today, fuel efficiency, moving to biofuels, which certainly Missouri is a leader in, opportunities for different electrification systems, or using electric vehicles, or even hydrogen-powered vehicles. I saw a hydrogen-powered vehicle out in front of the auditorium today. We need to look at all of these opportunities because I think they'll all play a role in our economy. And then finally, I want to end up on a slide about research and development. The University of Missouri system is, of course, a great treasure here in Missouri. It's the home of many great research and development activities, but I want to put energy research and development in context at a global scale. This is public sector energy research and development in the OECD countries. OECD countries are the rich countries of the world: Europe, the US, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and a handful of others. But in fact, if you look at the trends, it's kind of a gloomy trend. And I guess I want to bring this to your attention this morning because, in fact, I do think the leadership in Washington and Jefferson City and other places are looking to change this equation. But historically, looking back to 1974, during the oil shocks of the 1970s out to the current day, in fact, the trend lines for energy R&D are kind of going the wrong direction. And I bring this to your attention because, in fact, I think we can change this. There are those in leadership positions who want to hear from you, to understand that you want to see research and development in clean energy technologies and alternative technologies, that you aspire to a sustainable energy future. And, in fact, this is the data. And, of course, I mentioned a few minutes ago that 80% of the world's energy R&D occurs in two countries, the U.S. and Japan. So this is a pretty good picture of what's happening here in the United States. So then again, this is just public sector investments. Of course, the picture is very different if you look at private sector investments. So those who are in the energy business are putting a lot more money into energy R&D. But we've got to find that balance and make the investments today that will serve us in the future. So just to wrap it up, I'd just like to say thank you for inviting me today and taking a look at this global picture. In fact, it's one that I think we all need to think about, whether we're American citizens, citizens of Missouri. There are opportunities for us to play at a global scale. We are stewards of our future. We are stewards of our economy, our environment, and our energy security. And in fact, we can have a different future, a sustainable energy future, with deep emission cuts of our greenhouse gases. They are technically achievable, but finding the political will, the policy tools, the investment portfolios needed to make this change is our challenge. A technology revolution is needed in the energy sector. There's no getting around it, and in fact, we've kind of dabbled in energy policy, as Mr. Pickens said yesterday, for several decades, but in fact, an energy revolution is needed. The way we do business today will not serve us by the middle of the century. In fact, we'll be saddled with some very difficult environmental, economic, and energy security problems. So action is urgent. And in fact, there are barriers, but we're gathering here today. We have a dialogue. We understand our constraints. We also understand our opportunities. We're very creative people, and there are opportunities to change the way we do business. So we look forward to working with you. The World Bank does a little business here in the United States. The U.S., of course, is our biggest customer, and those at the IEA stand ready to help you, the International Energy Agency. And I hope when Missourians move forward in their energy plans, as you think about your own energy future, that you will think about it in a global context. Think about the United States and its place in the world as stewards of our natural resources. So thank you very much, and I guess the warm-up act for Governor Nixon is over, and I apologize for those first 5 slides. I just can't see them behind me. So thank you very much, folks.
Thank you, Robert. And now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Missouri's new energy czar, Mark Templeton, Director of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. Mark brings a unique set of skills and perspectives to DNR. He worked at McKinsey & Company in New York from 2001 to 2005, helping to develop green markets for the environmental sector. After leaving McKinsey, he managed an annual budget of $105 million as Associate Dean and Chief Operating Officer at Yale Law School. Mark's new role as the Director of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources is to lead Governor Nixon's initiative to expand the production of alternative energy in the state. He also manages agencies and programs focused on preserving and improving the state's natural and cultural resources. Mark is a Missouri native from Olivet, and he earned his bachelor's degree magna cum laude from Harvard. I'm the only one in the room that knows how to pronounce Harvard. Please join me in welcoming Mark Templeton.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Hey.
Thank you. I have to warm you up for the governor. I don't know whether it's tougher to start at 8 o'clock or 8:10 in the morning, or to be sandwiched between a Nobel laureate and President Forsey and the governor. But I'm thrilled to be here today. I want to just share with you a little bit about the sort of the state of the state in Missouri with regard to some of these issues, the kind of mindset that I think we need to have, and the set of actions that the Department of Natural Resources is going to be taking on these issues, and some thoughts about what other people can do. T. Boone Pickens yesterday really put out a great challenge to make sure that the discussions are happening, and then President Forsey yesterday said, let's have discussions, but let's have some action and follow up on some next steps as well. And I think that's really critical. Having come from an academic environment most recently, I think we need to take some of these great ideas and make them actionable. I'm just so excited to have the energy part of the portfolio at the Department of Natural Resources. When I was talking with the governor about the opportunity to come back to Missouri to work on these, I said to him, do you mean that I would have the opportunity to work for my home state on perhaps the greatest issue of our time? He said, yes. I said, well, sign me up. Merely a few days later, I was on my way back to Missouri. So first, let me tell you a little bit about sort of the state in Missouri and try to draw some of these big picture ideas in terms of what's going on in Missouri. I think it's important to understand that actually Missouri has had some success with regard to energy and environmental issues. There are many things we can be proud of in the state. For one, we manufacture great products here in Missouri. You may or may not be aware that the Ford Escape Hybrid is manufactured in the Kansas City, Missouri area in the Claycomo plant. The 100,000th Escape Hybrid rolled off the production line just last month. And the governor and I were in Kansas City just a couple of weeks ago with Linda Martinez and the Director of Economic Development and others, when Smith Electric Vehicle announced that it would be building its U.S. plant here in the old TWA maintenance hangar in the Kansas City airport area. Smith basically produces electric vehicles. They've had success in Europe for many years, focusing on fleet trucks. And that's where I think really applying ideas is really helpful. A lot of times people will say, oh, we've got these problems with batteries, the technology's not just there yet. But with creative thinking, you realize that you can serve some markets, such as those kinds of trucks, the AT&T or Sprint or Comcast or whatever kinds of trucks go out to service people that can come back to a centralized station for recharging. So again, using brain power to solve some of the practical business problems as the science is in the process of getting us where we need to be longer term. We also have great engineering firms and consulting firms, Burns & Mac, Black & Veatch, others who have their displays out in the hall. It's a tremendous talent that we have in the state in that regard to take some of these great ideas and make them very practical. We have communities that are committed to renewable energy. Rockport, Missouri is America's first wind-powered community. It's a city of 1,300 people, and they made history last year by being the first city to actually create more energy from renewable energy, wind power in this case, than actually the energy it takes to power the entire city. So this is, I think, an inspiration for many of us and shows that what we can do here in Missouri right now. I was so pleased to come back to the state after voters approved the Renewable Portfolio Standard, Proposition C, this past November. It passed in all counties but one, which by an overwhelming number, which I interpret as an endorsement from the citizens and voters of the state of Missouri for moving the state forward on this path. And also, as I've learned from my journeys throughout the state, there are communities that are taking action right now. So I was in Springfield a week ago meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, and they told me about a sustainability initiative and a sustainability pledge that they have developed, or that they are part of the group that's developed it. And 140 local businesses in Springfield have signed this pledge. Which shows, again, that this is not just activity taking place at the global level. This is not just people who've always been committed to environmental issues who are driving here. Businesses and business leaders right here in Missouri realize that it's time to engage on these issues. So it's an incredibly exciting time here in the state. Second, I want to just talk about some of the opportunities and challenges we face here in Missouri. With regard to energy efficiency, for example, Missouri ranks 45th out of 50 states, according to the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. Of the 8 states that border Missouri, only Kentucky is lower in the ranking than Missouri, and Iowa ranks 14th and Illinois 19th. And I know that there are all sorts of different ways that you can do the rankings and assign different weights to different kinds of activities with regards to the utility programs, building codes, combined heat and power, and things like that. But if for no other reason than state pride, we should do better than 45th. And to me, it shows we just have a tremendous opportunity in the state to do more with regard to energy efficiency. As so many people have said here, this is the kind of investment that pays back. It pays back over time. There are many things that we can do in this state, even with the low energy costs that we have right now, that have very short paybacks. And we need to work on what's the information we need to get out to consumers and businesses about these investments. What are things we can do to sort of help facilitate the capital markets in that regard to help with these kinds of investments? Just to give you a sense of the amount of potential, the ACEEE, again, said that if Missouri could save 15% in electricity and 10% in natural gas through energy efficiency, the total energy savings by 2020 would be the energy use of 1.3 million households. The CO2 savings would be the equivalent of more than 1 million cars taken off the roads, and the value of the energy savings would be $2.8 billion. This is a time that we need to think smart and make investments to bring Missouri into the next generation on energy efficiency. And my department is working on this. There's legislation pending in the General Assembly that also is trying to create the right set of incentives. So I'm hopeful about this, but there's much more we need to do with regards to making sure that we're not just solving the problems of the past in buildings, for example, with weatherization, but what are we doing to make sure we've got the kinds of new construction that will be energy efficient going forward. Another opportunity for the state is that we are 49th out of 50 states in the use of renewables to generate electricity. Now, Prop C will definitely change that and push us in the right direction, but there's a lot more we can do here. In terms of wind, I talked about Rockport. We're about 18th or 19th in terms of states, in terms of wind potential, so there's definitely more we can be doing there. In terms of solar, people will think, oh, well, we're not Arizona or New Mexico. Why would solar matter here? Well, on summer days, we actually get as much solar radiation as Florida does. And as the technology improves with regard to solar, as we sort of go further down the cost curve with the scales of economy, I think solar is going to be even more of an option for us and is certainly required under Proposition C as well. But I think people sell Missouri short with regard to solar. And in terms of biomass, I think we've got a great opportunity there as well. I don't think we're quite as far along in the development cycle with regard to biomass. But boy, if you're sort of looking for the great resources of the state of Missouri, agriculture is an incredible industry in this state. We need to work with people in the agricultural industry, people in the research universities. Once these techniques are developed, work with people in the capital markets to ensure that the next generation of biomass technology is going to be rolled out in the state to help us generate sustainable energy. And I guess just one other key point I'd make is that those are the opportunities for the state. We're going to be pushed into this whether we want to do it or not. So I think we really should seize the opportunity. There are at least three forces which are going to push us for this. First, sort of regardless whether you believe the Nobel winners or not, the scientists or not, people in Washington believe them. And the EPA has indicated that it is going to start to regulate greenhouse gases. It has already started to collect data from the sort of 85% of producers of greenhouse gases. Just last Friday, they said that its greenhouse gases are a health hazard and are going to start to regulate them. So on the administrative side, the government is moving. President Obama, as you know, has called for legislation in this area, and there have been half dozen or more bills in the past couple sessions of Congress, and Representatives Waxman and Markey are really pushing this issue now. So it's a little bit unclear what is going to happen, whether it will be a cap-and-trade regime, whether there will be a carbon tax, when it will happen, but I think the winds of change are blowing very strongly in Washington right now, and I think that we need to engage on these issues to look out for what's best for the world and for the nation, but also for the citizens in Missouri with regard to these issues. A second thing which is going to push us is that I don't think fuel prices are going to be as low as they have been. Some of the things which are somewhat uneconomic right now in this time of great economic difficulty will become more economic again, either whether it's through the incentives and regime created in Washington or just the sheer fact that energy prices are going to rebound. I think you can even see at the pump how prices have rebounded, and my understanding is that in terms of many of the sources of energy, such as oil in particular, amazingly enough, they've cut output even more than demand. So I think that we could pretty quickly see some price spikes there, which will again push us toward energy efficiency and renewable energy. And I think a third sort of push for us right now with regard to this is Missouri's record high unemployment. We in state government feel an obligation to help get Missourians back to work, to turn the economy around, and to make sure that these are green jobs, next generation jobs, the kinds of jobs that both address the immediate economic needs of our families and workers, but also that set them up for success as the economy is transforming, that gives them the kind of skills that they want and need to have to be successful over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So this is another push for us in state government that we feel very strongly, and I think is going to encourage us to work on energy issues here in Missouri. In order to address these challenges, I think we need to have a sustainable approach and to be talking about sustainability. By sustainability, I mean efficiency as well as effectiveness. So in terms of efficiency, we want to be sure that we're having the least amount of inputs for the greatest amount of outputs. And in terms of effectiveness, we want to have the best possible outputs. This applies both to energy issues, to environmental issues, and to economic issues generally. Again, we want to sort of get the most amount of energy out of the least amount of inputs. We want to make sure that on environmental issues, that our production processes use the least amount of inputs to generate the most environmentally beneficial outputs. And this is all in the context of economic growth and opportunity. We are not going to be able to just impose all sorts of regulations and mandates without understanding how it's going to affect economic growth. I have a business background, in economics and management science. I am committed to having an environmental policy that supports economic development, and that's part of the reason I'm so excited about energy, because this is sort of where the rubber really meets the road these days with regard to making sure that economic incentives are structured correctly to get the kind of new economy that we want to have. Yeah. Why does DNR have a role here today and going forward? Well, DNR, in addition to having the Energy Center as part of our operations, is an organization which focuses on the both and with regard to natural resources. And by that I mean we need to have environmental protection and preservation and economic development. That's actually part of the mission and vision for the department. The mission of DNR is to protect, preserve, and enhance Missouri's natural and cultural and energy resources. And we want to have a Missouri where people live and work in harmony with our natural and cultural resources, making decisions that result in a quality environment and a place where people can prosper today and in the future. So while some people might think of DNR as the Parks Department and as the state EPA, we actually have a much broader mandate, right? We are not the Missouri EPA. We are the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. And it is our duty, right, obligation, responsibility to all of our citizens to make sure that we are preserving our natural resources and making productive use of them. So what does that mean DNR is doing and will do in the future with regard to energy issues? So a first point is that my senior team and I have already been working very closely with Director of Economic Development Linda Martinez and her senior team to bring green jobs to Missouri. We have had several meetings in the department with Linda. I have gone out on presentations with Linda and her team trying to expand green job opportunities in the state. We are going to work very closely with them to make sure that we've got the right kind of economy in the state. I understand this may be a change in some ways from the past, but to me it's a no-brainer. This is what we're going to do. This is what the governor wants us to do, not just with economic development, but with agriculture and with all of the other departments in the state. We are going to put together an energy plan for the state. It's been more than a decade since we've had an energy plan for the state. A lot has changed since then. We need to update, revise, expand the plan to address the current realities and opportunities in the state. And I think that this is a role for state government to convene, bring together the best in all different parts of our state to make sure we've got a plan that reflects where we want the state to be in 2030 or 2050 and starts to talk about strategies for actually getting us there. This then, I'm sure, will lead to other specific activities that support that, probably some legislative proposals that are coordinated as well. The department also has an opportunity and an obligation to collect and disseminate best practices in industry. As I said, I've got a business perspective on this. I think that a lot of businesses could benefit in Missouri from hearing about the successes of what others are doing. We should praise the leaders and we should help the laggards along. This is an area in which we can all win. One other thing that we are working on right now is we're trying to transform some of our existing programs. With the stimulus funding, we have many times the amount of money we've ever had for low-income weatherization. So working with the governor, we decided to challenge those people who've been working on this in the past to come up with more creative approaches. We've changed the structure of the mechanisms there to encourage people to bring together different sources and to work with others in the past. And we're going to bring all sorts of different tools. We want to help businesses and work with businesses who are interested in competitive grants under the stimulus program and do other things. It's going to take time to turn the department more in this direction to allocate resources, but we are committed to working with people. In conclusion, I just want to say that the state has a tremendous amount of opportunity. We've got a great foundation. We at DNR are committed to putting more of our internal resources to support those in the research universities, our citizens generally, industries and businesses, to make sure that we live up to our full potential with regard to energy efficiency and renewable energy, and harness the best economic, social science, managerial thinking to promote the use of natural resources wisely. So thank you for your time, and I just want to say that it has been a real honor and privilege for me to work with Governor Nixon. He is so deeply committed to these issues and to having a strong and secure energy future for our state, and I know he will talk about that today. So thank you very much.